Hey guys, I'm Maggie, a Danish baker. Today I'm going to show you how to make what in Denmark they call Kanelstang or cinnamon braid, but I'm also going to show you how to make different versions of this. So it's not just cinnamon, but also in this case, raspberry as well. You won't find a raspberry braid in Denmark, but I really like to add different jams and stuff to it to get a different variation. So let's jump right in, roll up your sleeves, wash your hands, and let's get baking. Okay, so before we jump into this first step of making Danish custard, I just want to have a full disclosure and let you guys know that this is not the official way of making custard. This is what I call the cheater's way of making custard. And I know somebody is going to reprimand me for this. I did not learn how to make custard this way in school, but I don't just bake based off of the formal education that I've gotten. I also bake off of practical experience and experimentation. So I'm going to show you today the easiest way to make custard. You can see on my website, I have a page specifically dedicated to making custard, and it shows step by step how to make it the way that I was taught in school. We are going to start off with our sugar, and I'm making a larger portion, so you would be using a smaller pot than this. Then I do cornstarch. Next, we're gonna add some vanilla sugar. You could just use vanilla extract. Anything that's available that's vanilla, you could use that instead. And then we're gonna add some egg. So from here, we're just going to mix this together as best as you can to make sure that there's no clumps. You can see there's some egg white pieces, but those don't show up once it's cooked. The last two ingredients are milk and butter. The butter we're gonna wait until the very end, but the milk we're gonna add right now. And I just do a little bit at first to thin it out so that it incorporates. And then once it's pretty well mixed, I add the rest. So now we're gonna take this and put this over medium heat and stir it the entire time. Once it starts to thicken, you're going to bring it down to low heat until it doesn't thicken anymore. And then we'll come back and add the butter. It will take some time, so just be patient. So our custard is now where we would like it. It kind of does look lumpy right now, but trust the process. Once it sets up in the fridge, it smooths out quite a bit. So we add the butter, and we just mix this until the butter is fully incorporated. Now we're going to take this and just cover it with some plastic wrap. We need to make sure to push the plastic wrap all the way down so it's touching the custard. If you just cover it with a lid or with plastic and it's not touching the custard, it will form a film and condensation will build up. And so then you'll have this weird texture. Something I forgot to say at the beginning of the video is that you want to make this at least half a day to an entire day before you want to use it so that it can fully cool down. So it's ready to go in the fridge. You can also use pudding. If you have like an instant pudding mix, you could use that in a pinch. So far, I've been experimenting a lot with this. If you can freeze custard, the only way I've been able to figure out how to do that consistently is by putting it in piping bag and then putting it in the freezer. That's more of a tip for somebody who uses it on a very regular basis like I do. Anyway, we'll go into the next part. So we're going to start with water. Now I prefer to do at least room temperature water, if not slightly warm. Warmer water will help to activate the yeast. Then we're gonna add the yeast. Next, we'll do some sugar. Next is milk. When it comes to Danish baking, if you're outside of Denmark, using organic flour will mimic the texture the best. And that just has to do with the food regulations for processing wheat and flour. So now we're doing some eggs and then flour. So next we have salt, and then we have butter. I'm going to start with mixing it for 5 minutes on slow speed and then about 6 minutes on medium speed. And then I'll check the temperature and the consistency. It's the temperature and consistency that you'll go off of to know when you're finished mixing, not the time. You might be wondering why I didn't activate the yeast first in a sugary water solution. I have found that it does not matter to activate yeast as long as your dough passes these two tests. The first test is temperature. This one is the most important, in my opinion. So before I pull it out of the mixing bowl, it needs to be at least 24 degrees Celsius or about 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Then we know that it's warm enough to keep the yeast activated. If you don't have a thermometer and you're not sure what temperature it is, that's okay. You can also check with the gluten window test. In Denmark, this is called the Kanelstang test. And it's where you pull your dough and you see before it tears, can you get it to be kind of like a window? Now this was a good amount of stretch. that you just saw. That's what we want. If it did not pass the gluten window test, and if it doesn't pass the temperature test, keep mixing it on medium speed. But those two things I have found matter so much when it comes to consistency in the amount of time your bread is going to take to proof. Now we're just going to shape these into little logs. I'm just going to set these pieces of dough aside and let them rest for 5 minutes so that they can relax. And then I'll show you how we roll them out and what fillings we put in them. While the dough is resting, you can quickly whip this together. This in Denmark is called borgmestermesse, or it could also be called a marzipan bomongs, which is just butter and sugar. That's what bomongs is. So if you're in Denmark, you will just do this in thirds, where you do marzipan mixed with sugar, and then you will add the butter a little bit at a time. But if you're in America, which I am, or in other places of the world where it's not easy to get a hold of marzipan, then I just use some homemade almond meal or almond flour. You'll notice that this is what you would call dirty almond flour. That's because I prefer the flavor of just chopped almonds whole with the skin attached. And then I'm going to add some sugar syrup. This sugar syrup is just made by simmering together water and sugar. And mine is brown because I use cane sugar. But if you use just regular white sugar off the shelves, it will be clear. Then we'll just do the same amount of sugar and the same amount of butter. Now this butter needs to be soft. That is very, very important, or else you will not get a smooth mixture. And I prefer salted butter because I like the flavor profile that it brings, but you could use unsalted and that would also be fine. Whatever mixer you are using, just use a cake attachment and then scrape the sides in between mixing. We'll start at low speed so it doesn't poof out at you, and then we'll increase the speed and it will mix until it's super light and fluffy. You can see how it's just really nice and creamy. Scoop it, it's just really nice and soft. That's what we want. But it only took me maybe 3 minutes of mixing. Okay, so you might hear and see some noises in the background. My daughter is with me for this portion of video, and the audio might be a little bit different because I finally got my mic working, which is perfect timing with my daughter being around. Here's our pieces of dough for our braids. Now I'm going to take these off of the tray, and then I like to take some flour and just make a little row of it. So I flatten all of these pieces of dough, and then I'm going to just coat them in this flour. I don't want too heavy of a coating because I want the dough to stick to the surface a little bit. And then I'm going to just scoot all this flour out of the way so that I have it on standby, but it's not in my way. So then we take this dough and we start with the width, which we want to be about 5 or 6 inches, but we also want it to be roughly a rectangle. That one, it rolled out to not be very rectangular. So that's why I squished it together like that. And then we go for the length, which we want it to be about 1 foot or so. I'm using a half cookie sheet is what it's called. I want it to be about the width of my pan, whatever pan I'm using. And for me, it's the cookie sheet. And you also want to make sure that your dough doesn't go too thin. It's hard to see, but if you go much thinner than, this is probably a 1/4 inch thick or so, which would be like 1/2 centimeter, then it will tear when it bakes. You can put your hand across it. You can feel the most sticky side, and that is the side that we want down so that it will stick to the surface of our countertop the best. So we're going to start with the marzipan filling, and we're going to put the same amount in all of these, whether it's cinnamon or whether it has jam in it, it's all the same. And then we're going to just take a spatula, or you can use the same spoon as what you were using, and we're just going to spread it all out. You want to focus on going from end to end. It doesn't matter so much that you cover the entire width, but the ends it does. And then next we're going to do the Danish custard. With the cinnamon braid, you're going to have almost double the amount of custard, and then we're just going to spread that out just as we did with the marzipan spread. Then we're going to put cinnamon on the ones that are cinnamon, and you can do as much or as little cinnamon as you want. And the ones that we want to add jam to, we'll add jam to those. So then we're going to spread out the jam. So now we're going to roll these up, kind of like they're cinnamon rolls. So you'll take it and you'll roll it as best you can. And if your filling starts to fall out, then you can take your spatula and just kind of taper this end as best you can, and then move some of the filling up to the top. And then from here, we take whatever baking sheet we have and we move these over to the baking sheet. So we want to leave some room on the top over here, whereas over here it's hanging over, because now that we get into shaping these at a probably 45-degree angle, you cut through, not all the way to the bottom, but close. You don't have to cut that deep. You can cut more shallow if you want. It'll just change the look a little bit. And we just move them from side to side. So there's our braids. You can just cover them with 1 or 2 tea towels, put them in a warm place, and let them proof until they just become a little bit pillowy. We don't want them to double in size. This dough does not do that. We just want it to become more like a pillow, and I will show you that when they're done proofing. And then you can egg wash them and then bake them. And when I say to egg wash them, this is what I mean. So this is just egg mixed with water and a little bit of salt, and then I whisked it together. Brush this egg wash on top of your pastry. Here are our braids. They have proofed. You can see they're quite a bit more pillowy now. That is where we want them. Now we're going to bake them at 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius, and I'll show you those once they're all done. So they did have some pieces of marzipan spread that came out of them, and I just broke those off and put those to the side. If we cut into them, you can see what they look like inside. These baked for about 15 minutes. So there's our one with jam. It's quite soft and really moist. And then here's our one with cinnamon. You can see the cinnamon throughout. From here, you could put powdered sugar on it. You could also make a powdered sugar glaze, which the recipe for that is included in the recipe for these, because typically they do have glaze on them. So anyway, that's our braids. If you want to contact me, feel free to follow the recipe link. There's a contact page. You can email me pictures or whatever you would like to email me about. You can also comment down below, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Happy baking!